going on, guys? Today we're going to be doing brakes. So my boy Zain over here decided he wanted to do all 4 brakes, and he's letting me wrench on his car, and we're going to get these done and you guys are going to see how these brakes are done. Tools we will be using: 3/8 driver, 6mm Allen key, 7mm Allen key, 17mm socket for removing lug nuts, a 1/2 inch impact for removing lugs. That impact can also be substituted for a simple 1/2 inch driver if you do not have an impact. A 1/2 inch torque wrench and an extension, those are for torquing the lug nuts. Multi-purpose grease, that is for greasing the back of the pads and for greasing the sliding pins. A C-clamp. If you're just replacing the pads, aside from a zip tie, jack, and jack stands, this is all you will need. But since we are replacing rotors as well, you'll need a 16mm. That is for removing the brake caliper housing. We will be using a 3/8 ratchet. That is really unnecessary. The driver works just as well. That's just to get things off a little bit quicker. And a hammer, because these rotors haven't been off in over 10 years. Or just for a little bit of influence on getting that rotor off. As far as hardware goes, we have a brand new set of UUC rotors and WBR pads, which came with a new brake pad wear sensor that we're going to be installing today. Okay, so before we start ripping the brakes apart, the first thing we're going to need to do is to get the car in the air, and I have a jack and jack stand down there. I'm not going to go over too much about how to get these things in the air. I will leave a video link in the description if you guys want to know how to jack up your car. Second thing we're going to need to do is to take the wheel off so we can get to the brakes, and those brakes are 17mm. Alright, so to get the calipers off, they are a 7mm Allen key, and they are hidden behind these little dust boots right here. I got a flathead screwdriver. We're going to pop these guys off, just like that, and then the 7mm goes right in back here. And those come right off, and there's one right here, and then there's one directly underneath it on the bottom side. Alright, once those guys are out, you're going to need to remove the retaining spring. So the retaining spring, if you just push back on it, that guy pops right out.
There we go.
Alright, so last thing that you have to do before removing the caliper on the driver's side only is unplug the wire for the brake pad wear sensor. That guy is that little green wire that pops out of the caliper, and if you follow him right behind the shock, there's a little box where the wire plugs into. So you gotta pop the little connector out. So that little connector pops out.
Ooh, that was so dirty.
There we go. Now that that's out, you gotta chase the wire around the shock for the mounting points. And now the caliper should come off, but not without a fight. Try and go at it from the bottom too. There you go. The old pads slide out, and this side just pops right out. Now at this point, if you're just replacing the pads, you would just throw them back on and put the whole thing together. But since we're replacing the rotor as well, we have to get a little bit more into the brake system. So for now, it's really bad to hold the caliper by its brake line. Don't just let it hang there. We have a zip tie right here that we're going to zip tie the caliper to the shock to hold it up in place so the weight of the caliper isn't lying on the brake line. Alright, so to take the rotor off, we're going to have to remove this housing bracket right here. It's held on by a bolt right here and one right there as well. And they tend to be rusted on, so you might have to put up a little bit of a fight. There we go, housing pops right off. Alright, so one last thing to get the rotor off. There's a little Allen key bolt right there that holds the rotor onto place, and that guy is a 6mm. Once that guy's out, the rotor should just pop right off.
There we go.
There we go. Alright, so before we install the new rotors, one thing to note is a lot of rotors come with a oil film on it to prevent the rotor from rusting. So we're going to have to clean that off. We got some brake cleaner here, and we're just going to send it some brake cleaner and just clean all that stuff off.
There you go. Fine.
So now the new rotor goes on. Only thing to make sure you orient correctly is the hole for the Allen's bolt. And around there, because it sits on the hub. And then from here, get that guy nice and tight. Perfect. Alright, so from here, we can reinstall the caliper housing. Now we're going to open up the new pads, and the outer pad should slide right onto the housing. Yeah, there we go. And now we have to compress the caliper piston to account for the new pad thickness. A good thing to do before compressing the piston is to open the brake reservoir, just to let some air out when you start pushing the brake fluid back through the system. So we're going to take a C-clamp and just compress the piston back. So I like to use an old brake pad. Stick it right there. And from here we're going to stick the C-clamp over. And with the C-clamp we're just going to push the piston back into the housing.
Looks flush to me.
Yeah?
Pad's already hitting metal.
Alright, so you want to compress the piston all the way back into the caliper. Just give yourself some extra room. The caliper will adjust when we put the new pads in and step on the brake. Another thing I like to do when I'm doing brakes is to pop these sliding pins out and put some lube on these guys, as well as the back of the brake pads, just so the whole mechanism can slide easier. So I'm going to take a little bit of grease and rub that sliding pin with it. Do the same to the other one. I'm going to put some on the back of the pad. And I'm going to put some on the ring of the piston. So this is for the driver's side only, but we have a brake pad wear sensor that's going to go on. It's a common misconception on E36s that both sides have them. Really only the driver's side has it. So if you're installing a new one, the new one slides right into that little port right there. And this guy slides right down the center of the caliper. From here we can put the new pad on. Now the whole caliper slides back on. And once that's on, then we can start going after these sliding pins. Just going to make sure they're nice and snug. Now from here, I'm going to run the new wire behind. I'm going to plug this little rubber boot into its place on the shock and plug the new sensor in. And make sure to get him tucked away in his little spot in the box. After that, reinstall the little retaining clip.
You saw it to me?
Yeah, that's in. There we go. Once that's done, you gotta remember to put on these little dust boots for the sliding pins. And that's it. Brakes are done. From here we just put the wheel back on, drop it, and torque it. Pump the brakes a few times to get the brake system adjusted. And the wheel torque spec is 89 inch-pounds. And be sure to torque them in a star pattern. Once you're done, make sure to close your master cylinder. Pump the brakes until the pedal gets really firm so the braking system can adjust. You see that? Passenger side. No brake pad wear indicator. Just on the driver's side.
Brakes are all done. Thanks guys for watching.
Keep it fresh, and I will see you guys later.
You should take it slow.
So much out, it's unbelievable.
I wouldn't doubt it because so much process goes into this. Trial and error.
Alright. A fat shout out to that oil cooler gang though. Oh yeah.